The fatal shooting of a grandmother last month in Dorchester has led to widespread concern and outrage in the community. That has since led to the offer of a $10,000 reward for information on the case, an effort by the Boston Youth Violence Task Force and the New Democracy Coalition. To tell us about the effort is the coalition's founder and director, Kevin Peterson. Thank you very much for being with us, Kevin.
Good to be here under unfortunate circumstances.
One of the things that we need to touch on here is the family of Delois Brown. She was the person who was shot. What about your contact with the family and their feelings at this moment about getting this case solved?
Well, they're anxious about having the case solved. More importantly, as I've been in contact with them, there is a profound sense of grief, a profound sense of anxiety, and even fear. The loss of a matriarch, as anyone can imagine, is devastating, is poignant. And so as I've visited a family over the last month or so, I've come to know them and understand the dynamics of a multi-generational family. Mrs. Brown was not only a grandmother, she was a great-grandmother. And that family lives within the context of that three-decker in the Bowdoin, Geneva area. And every time I visit, there's a poignant sense, a palpable sense of loss. They hurt and the community hurts. So we are taking this opportunity, as tragic as it is, to find a sense of hope by offering a $10,000 award for the arrest and conviction of the murderer or the murderers of Delois Brown, who was the heart of the family and was a key member within the community. She fed those who were hungry around her. She was a domestic, she was a registered voter. She was the type of person that brought comfort to a community. And now we find ourselves really in the wake of this devastating loss.
Well, with loss, it's not just the person who happens to get killed. This is about people who are survivors as well.
That's right.
Among them was a little kid nearby when she was shot. I mean, she's got to live with that the rest of her life.
Well, yes, Mrs. Brown's family members were there on the pavement as she died on the porch. I've had conversations with the great-granddaughter who calls Mrs. Brown Gigi. And as I was reflecting with the family and this great-granddaughter, the sense of loss is just was devastating. As this little girl referred to Gigi, it's what she called Delois Brown, Gigi. It saddens the heart of the community as much as it saddens the heart of that family. But we've in the faith community are committed to hope and justice and a sense of optimism. So we push back against the pessimism, against the nihilism that may exist among those people who are connected to this case, the perpetrator or the perpetrators of this crime. And so we call upon the community to speak out, to tell the truth, to be courageous, and bring this person or persons to justice, because it is not only the family that's been wounded, not only the family has to live with this scar, it is the community, and it is indeed the entire city of Boston. When you think about the senseless murders that over the last few years that have been connected with police-assisted death towards Black people, we must also be mindful of how Mrs. Brown's death may have been connected to the death of a person who happens to be Black. It is likely that that person or persons are Black. So as we are outraged around the death of George Floyd, and we should be, Trayvon Martin, as we should be, Black people within the community at Delois Brown lived in should be equally outraged. And we do not have to march, or we do not have to call for massive police reform. We need to, in some sense, look internally and call for reform within the Black community, a moral reform, existential reform, so that we build ourselves up to a point of courage and bring the killer or killers to justice, so that the community is made whole.
Kevin, I imagine giving information about acts of violence is risky for anybody, but what about this case with the moral factor? Because you hear the word snitching a lot, and I think there's a difference between snitching when someone accused of a crime makes a deal with the police and prosecutors, and somebody who's a concerned community member who has deep feelings for the family that survived that. Talk about that difference.
Well, there is I mean, you've said it correctly. There is a difference. The stop snitching mantra that we hear so often in the Black community, but other places, is transactional. It's transactional between a deal potentially between the police and some members of the community who may want to get off of being connected with some crime. We make the distinction between that sort of snitching and truth telling. In this case, with Delois Brown, we want people who witness this killing, or who may have been in the environment at the time of this killing, to tell any truth they might have related to this killing. It was one of the warmest spring days in the summer, April 10th, last month. Many people were out. Mrs. Brown was preparing for a cookout the very next day. People were fleeing from the scene of that shooting, including family members. Somebody saw something, and we know for sure, as some tips have come in over the last 48 hours, we know for sure that people witnessed and people have information leading to the arrest of the individual. So we push back. We rebuke any ideas about this being connected to snitching. Coming to the fore and giving information about the murder of this great grandmother is a matter of bringing healing to a community that's been ripped apart. The heart has been ripped asunder. So we appeal to the moral sensibilities, the ethical sensibilities of people within the community to respond, so that the fabric of the community can be repaired.
Kevin, with any crime, you can call the police, the detectives, or even the anonymous tip line, but you also had numbers where people can call your organizations working on this reward as well. Explain the event. Maybe people would feel more comfortable calling those numbers.
Well, we are offering this anonymous cash reward of $10,000. It is anonymous because the person doesn't have to identify themselves publicly. They have to identify themselves in some way so that we could get money to them. But we are keeping any information that we get that leads to the arrest and conviction of a person or persons connected to this. We're keeping that private. We'll pass that information along to the police, and the police will deal with it accordingly. We asked that our personal cell numbers be called. So I am giving my personal cell number for anyone who wants to call, who has information leading to this, to the settlement of this crime. It is 617-304-5068. Any call is anonymous. It'll go directly to my line or directly onto my voicemail, and I will immediately call back. We've received a number of calls to date, and we're responding to them accordingly. So the number is 617-304-5068.
Kevin, one other thing that occurred to me, because as you mentioned, we're talking about the past few years. Within that time, we also had another grandmother who was fatally shot in Mattapan. She was not targeted,
That's right.
but she was the victim. And certainly in my mind, I'm thinking this is happening too often.
Way too often, which compounds the tragedy, which compounds the emergency, the crisis that exists within certain pockets of the community. We certainly can't condemn the entire community, because the entire community consists of law-abiding citizens who contribute greatly to the vibrancy and the decency of the city at large. We are concerned about a criminal behavior elements who engage in criminal behavior, who make situations in our communities worse, particularly worse for those people who are vulnerable, like great grandmothers in Dorchester or Mattapan. It is an internal reckoning that we in the Black community must engage, and we must take responsibility. We must acknowledge it and take responsibility for the extent to which these incidents emerge, and we must respond to them in concert with law enforcement. But as members of the clergy, we must also engage this as a moral issue that that touches upon the loss of a life, as all lives are sacred. So we want to respond to this as members of the clergy also, which is equally and maybe more important than law enforcement in some respects.
Well, thank you very much for sharing the appeal with us.
Thank you.
There was Kevin Peterson from the New Democracy Coalition. We'll have more news in just a moment.